Welcome, everybody, to session two of the IC Learning Festival. We sent out an email a little bit earlier that had a link to the recording of session one. So if you did miss that, the recording is there, but you don't have to worry because the session will stand alone and I will constantly make explicit the links between the two. Welcome, Lindsay. So we had, yes, on Monday, we covered how to gather more perspectives to get a richer understanding of the problem, the situation, the event that we're looking to understand, the person even that we're looking to understand. Today, we're going to look at, well, what do you do with all this information, right? In fact, that information can feel quite overwhelming, perhaps a little bit like this. All right. What's one word you'd use to describe this clip? Pop that in the chat. Chaos. Chaos. Insanity. Yeah. A literal fire drill going on here where um, the overwhelming sensation of chaos and insanity is clear. And I want to get a quick pulse check on everyone who's joined. What is, or how often on a scale of 1 to 5 do you feel like this in any given week? And it could be, our own version of this, right? That feeling of overwhelm, of chaos, of insanity, of just dealing with so much input that we don't know how to respond. How often does that happen? Just pop a number in the chat. We'll get a quick sense of where everyone's at. I'm probably a 3 or a 4 on this. So we've got a lot of threes, 2 to 3. Oh, Brad, you got nice and even kill there for the most part. All right. But we all feel like this at some point, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Um, I'm wondering if anybody has an example just to bring to life this idea, because we talked about this on Monday, right? This difference between logical and narrative thinking. And so it's easy to put a label of insanity and chaos and say, it happens kind of on average 2 to 3 times a week. How's that actually shown up for you? Does anybody have an experience in the last couple of weeks that they can relate to this? Shilpa, did you come off mute? Do you have something to share? Okay, I don't think so. So Brad, D, Lindsay, D, do you
I
have something?
I
Yeah.
have one, yeah. So it's kind of a funny one, but my company's going through a process of kind of like renaming products.
Mm,
And I mean, what's shared here stays here, but a little bit of chaos happens sometimes when even different groups within a company are
yeah.
using different names for
Yeah.
one product because everyone is still learning the new name.
Mm,
Um, that
yeah.
can create a little bit of
Ye-
workplace chaos.
Confusion, insanity, all of the above. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a really good example. And so, yeah, you're getting all these conflicting points of view and ideas on how things should be. So that's a good example. It happens to all of us in some way. And if you do what we covered on Monday really, really well, this kind of thing actually does happen a little bit more frequently in like a microcosm, right? Because we're talking about getting a lot more information and different perspectives on a problem. And that can feel very overwhelming to make sense of it, to get out on the other side a clear point of view. And I think we can all relate to this when we see um, in our work the confusion that starts to come in when people are not able to communicate clearly, right? And how that leads to slow decision making, confusion, especially with cross-functional collaboration. that breakdown just becomes very, very real. Okay, so I introduced this concept on Monday, this idea of logical and narrative thinking. We talked about how we wanted to get people to, in the narrative sense, as much as possible, to convey meaning. Today, we're actually going to focus in on the logical side because this next skill set is a very logical skill set. And you can actually use AI, which is infinitely better at us than us at the logical approach, able to compute and process information just so much more volume and so much quicker than we can. And I'm going to show you how to do that today as well. All right. So this is our framework for universal perspective. And today we're focusing in on the sense. So how to go from scattered thinking, which can happen when you have that feeling of overwhelm, to having a clear point of view. So that's what I'm going to talk about today, converting information into insight. To do that, we're going to cover three tools. I'm going to give you the tool and you're going to get an awareness of it. For those, if you're all in the learning profession, we're going to hit the awareness level. We're not going to be able to we're not going to have enough time to go deeper and give you a chance to practice this. But I am going to give you, actually, I'll get to that in a second. This is what we're going to get awareness of. MECE, which is that mutually exclusive collective resources, the pyramid principle, both of these from the world of consulting, and then so what thinking, the ability to look at a problem or a situation and come up with an insight based on that. So I said I'm going to cover the awareness part of that today, but I'm going to leave you with that awareness, these tools, and prompts to use ChatGPT to help you. So you will be able to go and practice this immediately after the session in a way that's really helpful, hopefully on data, on information that you're actually currently working through right now. All right, does that sound like a good plan? All right, awesome. Okay, so the first concept that's important to know is MECE. Pop in the chat if you have heard of this concept before. Just drop a yes if you've heard of this before. All right, so this sounds like it may be a new concept. D's heard of it. Okay, cool. So we got 45 minutes here. I'm going to try and get us through the information at an awareness level. But if you have a question, if anything's not clear, stop me. I'll explain it in depth and I'll try to give you some examples as well. Okay, so MECE is an organizing principle that helps us organize information into discrete, non-overlapping parts. It stands for mutually exclusive, so that's the non-overlapping part. And it's collectively exhaustive, meaning we haven't left anything out. It is a complete set of information. Okay, so some examples of that. This above here is mutually exclusive. This would not be. We've got some overlap. And this is collectively exhaustive. It represents the entire space. And if think of these shapes as kind of bits of information, right? And there's something missing that's crucial for us to understand this entire space. Okay, so just to think about this in terms of um, an example, let's actually do a quick class activity. And I find in running through this example, there's no right or wrong answer to MECE, which is the interesting part. But in running through the example, we'll tease apart some of the crucial nuances of it, which will then help you when you have a ChatGPT prompt for this. Okay, so here's the exercise. Is this MECE? Pop in the chat, yes or no. And like I've already said, there is no right or wrong answer. So what I'm going to invite you to do is make a justification for your response. And I think you could justify that this is both a yes and no. All right, Brad, as our fearless leader in the chat, why is this not MECE?
So I'd say it's not collectively exhaustive because it doesn't, I mean, if it was an exhaustive list, it would have, every city in in each of these countries
Yeah.
um, or, if it was to be like the top three biggest cities in each country, then Australia only has two.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very, very good answer to if this was a look at every city or the top three cities in the world, 100%. So I'm going to come back to your point, Irene. Why is this MECE but not? Why is this the ME but not CE? Like Irene is just going to a spot where she can talk. And Maria, looks like you're on the same page here as well. So curious to hear both of your thoughts.
Similar to what Brad already mentioned, that
Uh,
it's excluding the different, it's mutually excluding, but it's not getting all the cities. If it is about only all the capital cities, it's still not comprehensive enough. So the C
yes.
part is not covered also from my point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's very valid. Irene, anything you'd like to add to this? We can't hear you, Irene. All right. I'm gonna come back to you in a sec. Hopefully you get to figure out that audio. All right, now let me present it this way. What if this was every city that had an office for a company? So this was every office that that company had. Would this be mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive? Maria, to your point, right? So, and I think Brad's as well, is saying like, look, this is mutually exclusive here, but we're leaving some stuff out. But what if the data set was every city that had an office, and these were only, 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 17 offices? Then it would be MECE, right? Yeah. So this is the most important point that I want you to take out of this. The idea of MECE is you get to define the data set. So you get to define what is collectively exhaustive. And there's so many different ways to slice and dice that depending on the context of it, it would make it. But I think you've all kind of captured, you've all intuitively got this idea of mutually exclusive, right? So there's no overlap between these. And then collectively exhaustive, well, it depends. What are we analyzing here, right? Okay, so that's the first important point here. This is a fundamental principle, kind of a building block principle that we'll continue to use. It's really good for prioritizing decisions, diagnosing problems, spotting gaps, identifying trends. It is not good, and this is an important point. Using MECE is not good when you're in the early stages of exploration. So the stuff we covered on Monday in the seek a part of the framework is not useful for this. You don't need to go to this level yet. You're trying to keep an openness. You try to suspend judgment and capture all the nuance that's in there. So this is not a good that would not be a good time to use MECE. But when you are analyzing the information, you feel like you've gathered enough of it, then MECE becomes very useful. Okay, so quick benefits of it: it avoids double counting and confusion, and it helps us develop reliable insights because we get these very clear, distinct categories. Okay. Any questions on MECE? Anything not totally clear before I move forward? All right. So that's building block number one. Now let's look at how to apply that with the next tool called this is the pyramid principle. So it's also based on a consulting framework. This comes from Barbara Minto, a McKinsey consultant who it's called Minto's pyramid. And to illustrate how this works, I want you to we'll do another quick class activity. I'm going to show a case study about a gym in a second. And I want you to look through, I'm going to give you about a minute to look through it and to see like what from this information, what action should this gym take? Okay. Let's put a timer there of a minute. All right, I know this is blocking the text here. I can't actually move it for some reason. All right, I'm going to stop you right there because you're probably all feeling a little overwhelmed looking at this wall of text. And before you even answer this question, let me show you this. Okay, now, what action should the gym take? There's no right answer really to this. Anything can go. But who would like to venture a suggestion for what this gym should do? Lindsay, would you be willing to give it a shot?
I'm not gonna lie, I was just smirking because this is like what I deal with my subject matter experts all the time of
Hmm.
the wall of text and then me having to distill it down to what you just showed us. So
Yeah.
I was just having an internal validation
Yeah.
moment. So
Yeah. Well, that covers my point, and it's less about what this action this gym should take, and more about how we go from this to this, right? And that's exactly what you're saying. You spend so much of your time doing, and this is the skill set, right? To be able to take this kind of information and compress it in a way that is just easy to digest in 10, 15 seconds, so that an executive can make a decision, which is like most of, so much of what we need to do at work. And so that's what we're going to be focusing on today. So MISI is a component of this. The other way, the pyramid principle is the other way to be able to do this. And there are 5 steps to applying the pyramid principle. Again, I'm going to cover this pretty quickly at an awareness level, but I'm going to give you a prompt to use at the end. Um, and actually, okay, yeah, there it is. All right. So let's go through what this is. So if this was, let's just say this pyramid represents your thinking, okay? And so it gets filled with all this information. And actually, you start with information. We obviously, we're not all a blank mind, right? So you start with some information, given data you've seen, conversations you've had, something you've noticed, right? And then we gather information, like we talked about on Monday in session 1, using how, what questions. All right. And we kind of we gather this information from others and we start to update our thinking. And this can start to get quite overwhelming. And that's that feeling we were talking about earlier, like the fire drill, that feeling of overwhelm. And we need some way to kind of make sense of all of this. I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to introduce an example next to explain how this works and to apply those 5 steps that we just covered. Okay, here are 9 houseplants. All right, they all have different aesthetic, prints like they all look different. So they may appeal to you in different ways, different colors. They also have different needs in terms of how to care for these. Okay. What I'm going to use as an example is we're going to create a guide for someone on how to shop for dramatic houseplants. All right, these are all somewhat dramatic in their care needs. Okay, so that's going to be how we use this as an example. Okay, so we've got these nine plants, and we want to create this guide. So we're going to use MISI and the pyramid principle to do that. Okay, so step 1, like I said, was to label. So labeling just means grouping like ideas so that they can be kind of thought of collectively. Okay, so this is again, remember I said the logical narrative thing. We're very much in the logical realm. We're putting labels on things which do not capture the nuance of the things in that label, but they're still useful, right? It's still useful to categorize and organize. Okay, so these are the house plants with that we mentioned. if you had some time to kind of look through, actually, let me just give you a sec here. Anything jump out that any like similarities jump out between one or two of these plants, or two or three of these plants? Anybody want to point out a pattern that they recognize?
The first two in the first column, fiddle leaf and string of pearls, because of the demand for bright light.
Yes, we got bright lights. I think Irene mentioned that as well. We got sun, we got water, we've got some soil. Yeah. Okay, so there's some similarities over there. So I'm going to jump us ahead. There's what Maria mentioned there. So there's definitely a big sun and light element to it. Croton is the same. Water is these three, and then we've got orchids and Boston ferns that have humidity needs. And then we've got the snake plant, which is just cool no matter what. Okay. So now we've grouped these in a way that they are sort of matched. The next step is to eliminate the data that doesn't fit. Okay. So eliminating data that doesn't fit. If we are creating a guide for how to pick a dramatic houseplant, is anything in here that doesn't really fit in that guide? Snake plant. Yeah. This is not a drama queen. You can't go wrong getting a snake plant, right? So we don't really need that for the purposes of this analysis. Okay. Then we move into the grouping phase. Can be kind of done with the first two. You're labeling, you're kind of grouping at the same time. Okay, so grouping is just saying, taking that once we've done the labeling and just organizing it together. Okay, so we've got the fiddle leaf, the croton, the string of pearls. These are all our lighting drama queens. We've got our watering woes and our humidity divas. Okay, so we have now these three groups. We want to now develop an insight. Okay, so we're sort of compressing and abstracting the information that exists here, right? Because this is still a lot. Like if someone had to read through this, there is a nuance to each of these, right? This one drops its leaves. Okay, is that relevant? This one gets leggy. Like you kind of, we're not trying to determine again, what's the purpose, what's the audience? This is someone who's trying to decide to buy a house plan. What's relevant to these people? What is the so what insight that we can give them on top of this? Okay. So if this is the information, who would like to venture? Irene's got a snake plant there, I'm assuming. Who would like to venture a stab at what an insight might be for one of these? If it sounds too simple in your head that you feel like you don't want to answer it, that probably means you're onto something. It is that simple. Maria, I'm gonna go back to you. Give us your best guess at one of these.
Um, my insight will be that not for all the plants, let's say the water is the first problem, looking at the lighting drama queens.
Can you elaborate on that? You're saying that the water is a more like a higher priority as a problem than the others?
No, I meant that not for all of these three categories. So if I take these three as three different categories that we grouped or three different groups,
Yeah.
not for all three, a water and watering is the main, let's say, challenge or watch out, because I
Yeah.
see the first one where it is about the sunlight. So
Yeah.
that would be
Okay.
it.
That's an interesting way to look at it. Yeah, like you would think, I guess, watering is essential to all plants, but what you're taking away from this is it's not actually that essential to the two maybe on the outsides.
To one of the groups, yeah, because I
Yeah.
tend to not get well with plants, but my husband does very well.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So that's a very valid attempt at it. Here's three other attempts. Okay. And again, when you're coming up with the insight, the key thing I want you to leave with today is the audience matters. And that's actually very key to the whole universal perspective framework. Or who you're communicating to matters. If we were creating a guide for the people growing these plants, the insight would be very different, right? This is for people buying these plants. So here's one way to do it, right? If you have plenty of natural light, choose one of these. If you like a regular routine and want to be active parent, choose one of these, right? Watering is something that you have to do frequently. And if you live in a humid environment or want to invest in a humidifier, choose one of these. Okay. No right or wrong answer, but that could be one way of kind of creating an insight on that. And again, it's for the audience that we are we are creating this for. And I'm glad you like this, Maria. This was Freya's brainchild. When I first saw her put this example together for what I was trying to communicate, I laughed out loud, literally. I thought it was so good. Okay. So we've got our three insights here, which represent these. The next step and final step is to come up with the main insight. What is the so what takeaway for someone who's buying this guide? Why should they buy this guide, right? And so again, we want to apply a so what approach. By the way, I'm going to come back to so what thinking after I finish this example. So I'm going to give you a little bit more on that if you're thinking like, oh, how do I how do I come up with a so what, right? So I'm gonna come back to that. Okay, so these are the three. Oh, so wait, we did yeah, actually no, that's fine. I'm gonna move on to this. I've moved the order of these around a little bit, but let's just say going back to for simplicity's sake, these are those three, right? So you got the humidity, the lighting, the watering. Those are the insights over here. One way to then express the so what of this could be something like that. Or even more simply, something like that, right? Which, if you think about it, when someone, when you first sort of presented with all of these, someone might I would probably look at them and go like, oh, well, which one is going to look nice in my home, right? And so you're kind of looking at it from that perspective, or, which one goes with what I already have, or, so there's like so many ways to choose basically. And what this guide and the value we're providing to people who are buying this guide is helping them make that decision in a way that's actually going to result in a plant that survives, basically, right? And so that's the benefit of this. And that's if I now ask, so if you to reflect on kind of what you're working on, is to take lots of information about an event. You have to have kind of an objective in mind, right? And an audience. Those are the two key things. So we know we're creating a guide on how to choose a house plant, and it's for people who are going to buy this into their homes, right? So whatever you're working on, like what's your objective, and who's the audience for that? Who do you communicate that to? And if you then apply these principles of mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive, right, which is what these categories are, and then the pyramid principle of creating insights, layering up and layering up, you've now created an entry point right here for people to go, oh, well, this is a guide about how environment is everything for plants, right? And so that is it's immediately easy for me as an audience to go, okay, that's interesting. Yes, I want to find out. And then I can go and dig into the details and look at the nuances of each of the plants and all of that kind of thing. But I can also filter it out at that level and go, oh yeah, I'm not interested in buying plants, so I'm not going to buy this book, right? Like, so it really kind of, that's the benefit of this. Yeah, so typically when we run this for clients, right, we'll give you an opportunity now to start to practice this on a data set. And I really wanted to include that, but we don't have a lot of time together. So we're not going to be able to do that. But I am going to provide you with three prompts that we have created. Well, actually two that I created and one that a friend of mine did. actually one that I created, one that Freya created, and one that a friend did. But they are all included for you in a guide that Freya's going to pop the link to in the chat. This is one of them. It's a bit longer than this, so it's cut off. This slide is more of a placeholder. Um, but you will see when you get a chance to open the Google Doc that if you take this prompt, basically what you can do with this one, this is the MECE one, right? So this will be at the top of the example. You take the MECE one and you put in this prompt and you put in all the data sources that you have, right? Which it helps you kind of define what those could be. Reports, notes, interviews, visuals, like anything. It will then suggest to you three different options for a way to organize it through MECE. And I purposefully made it that it suggests options for you because this is not thinking you can outsource. Okay, you have to know the context, you have to know the audience, but the prompt, the AI can help you with ideas, right? And that's the value of this. So this is a really quick and easy way to go put that information in, get three really thoughtful ways to organize it in a MECE principle, and then you can kind of pick and choose what works for you. Okay, so that's the one that I would recommend for you to go practice. I'm gonna share the other two in a second. Okay. We're going to now talk about the so what piece of this to round it up. But before I move forward, does anybody have any questions? Okay, here you go, Maria. Is comprehensive here used interchangeably with collectively exhaustive? Oh, wait, are you talking about in the prompt? Yeah, yeah, it is. That's actually a very good point. I should maybe change that to actually say and collectively exhaustive. Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit redundant because we're saying using MECE principles over there, and AI would know what that means. But yeah, good spot.
Exactly, exactly. I was just wondering so that there are no false interpretations then to start looking for what the abbreviation could stand for. And I wasn't sure if it's on purpose set here comprehensive because it's maybe more known term when it kind of explores different information.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So we've tested this out and it works pretty well with the information we've given it. But yeah, that would be something to look at, actually. Like I wouldn't ever say just take a prompt and just keep using it forever. Like make sure you pay attention to the output, and yeah, that level of attention to detail is great. And also, I just love this point basically that you're making is that words matter, right? Really, really do. And when you, especially in the context of a large language model, which is literally that's the operating system for the model is language. And so yeah, these things do definitely matter. But we have tested this prompt. It works really well. It gives you a lot of useful ideas to kind of speed up this process. And again, that's the benefit of this. This MECE and permit principle is a very mechanical, logical way of organizing information. So it is okay to outsource that for an AI to help you with, right? To speed it up a bit. But ultimately, you have to define the scope, and you also have to know what that output is. It actually good, right? Is this actually going to be useful for the objective we have? All right. Does anybody else have any other questions before we move forward? Okay. So that's the first prompt, and we've talked about MECE and pyramid principle. I want to come back to this idea of so what to give you a sort of a framework for thinking of it or a story to remember it. This is Nora Ephron. Does anybody know who Nora Ephron is? Lindsay, I see you nodding. Who's Nora Ephron?
She's a writer, director, producer who has made much loved movies of our time. I think a lot of them star Diane Keaton. So
Yeah,
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 feel
he's
good
very much
movies.
exactly. Yeah, When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in
Hmm.
Seattle. Yeah, amazing screenwriter, producer, director, like you said. Okay, so this is a quick story that I read in a book where it is Nora Ephron sharing this story when she was at journalism school. Okay, so she's in journalism school with a bunch of other students, and their professor gives them an assignment. And the assignment is to write about an upcoming faculty conference for the student newspaper. Okay. And the assignment is to write the lead, right? And that's that's lead, right? So that's like in journalism, that's like the bottom line, like the so what, basically, right? For this piece. So they write the lead for an article in the school newspaper about an upcoming faculty conference. So they're given all this information about the conference, and they all dutifully produce versions of the leads that look like this, right? I'll give you a sec to read some of those. So they all focus on the details of the conference, right? The speakers, the location. But afterwards, the teacher reviews all their submissions and pauses and says to them, like, you've all missed the lead completely. None of you got this right. The lead for this story is this, right? This is an article for the school newspaper. This is for like, and I don't know if I mentioned, yeah, it's a high school, right? So it's for high school students. That's what's relevant to them, right? None of this is important. Yeah, that's the why behind why this is the fact, but that's the so what, right? And so what thinking is the creative part of this module, right? Of sense making, because you have to look at what's not there and call it out, right? This was a regurgitation of everything that was there, which an AI can do that, right? This is what's not there and what is relevant to the audience that's being written for. Okay, so this is a very important step, and this is like the cherry on top that you can put on the analysis. But you can use ChatGPT to help you. And so it may sound a little counterintuitive to say, this is like the creative part and AI, an AI could do this, right? But not really this. Well, it's not entirely true. An AI can give you ideas for this. And that's because the ideas are just different perspectives. So you can get an AI to give you thousands and thousands of perspectives, but you got to choose the one that's going to resonate the most. And so we created this prompt I think this was Freya, this was the one you created, right? Yeah. You come in, you use this to define your audience, right? That we talked about that, how important that part is, right? So your audience, who's your audience? Write that in. Again, you'll go back to the Google Doc. You can copy and paste this there, and then it asks the AI to come up with, again, alternatives, and you can change this, right? By the way, provide 10 alternative statements for me to choose from, along with the rationale. And what it's doing is it's looking at it from different perspectives, and the AI is coming up with like the most probable outcome, but you're forcing it to give you 10 most probable outcomes. And so it's going into its sort of data set and it's giving those to you. And then you review those and you go, and look, there might not be anything in those first 10, right? But what we have found in testing this is it gives you ideas for what the insight could be. But ultimately, as the human in the loop, you have to decide what that is, and that's our responsibility, right? And our privilege, I guess, to be able to be the one that connects what's really relevant to our audience, right? Which, by the way, if you are doing seek well, you understand your audience well, right? You understand what they need and what they want, and so you've got that much better understanding of what's going to resonate for them. Okay, so really, really useful prompt for this. Again, play around with it, tweak it if you want. You can also tweak it like by giving it different personas and saying like from this perspective, what is the so what, and so like lots to play around with there. But just want to be clear, the creative act is the final act, and that's your choosing which one to go with. Okay. Anybody got any questions on these prompts? Anything in general that we've covered so far? All right. This has been awesome, by the way. You guys have been a really great group to do this with, and this is the first time I've compressed a lot into, this is usually at least 2 hours into like 45 minutes. So we're actually perfectly on time. I'm going to wrap this up, give you one more prompt at the end, which is also obviously in the Google Doc, and then we'll be out of here and you'll get some time back in the hour. So just to recap, what we talked about is that MECE, and actually even before this, is we have these complex problems. In Seek, we talked about we talked about a way to gather more information, more information. And now we're talking about using MECE to break that down, right? Break those complex problems down into clear, simple parts where there's no overlap and no gaps. All right, and then to use the pyramid principle, or this problem pyramid as we call it, to go straight to the point, to take that information and come up with an insight. And you can do that many layers of it until you get to your main insight. All right. And if you want to practice all of this, you can use this last prompt, which a friend of mine, Nate Nasrallah, he's on LinkedIn, and he's a sales guy actually, but he posted this the other day and I tested it out. I was blown away by it. It's a really great tool for practicing business acumen. So it gives you this like management case study, and I find myself like you sort of use your intuition and common sense and give it your best shot at like what you think is it's like it's step by step. It takes you through it, right? And then it gives you feedback on what you're doing. So it says like, oh, that's a good use of MECE, and then it kind of gives you like suggestions on how to improve it. And yeah, it takes you through this whole thing. So you end up making a recommendation for this sort of fictitious client for a consulting firm. So really cool. I played around with it. I highly recommend that. And that's a way to kind of just bring this all together. So the first prompt helps you just take stuff you're working on and MECE it. The second prompt helps you get to like this level of or I guess ideas for so what insights. This one is like this isn't those first two is for working on your own information. This one is just if you want to practice these skill sets and just get good at them. It'll give you fake information and you work through it. So it's actually great if you don't have something you're working on right now, start with this one and give you kind of an overall sense of it. And then once you have stuff that you want, use the other two. Okay. All right. Before I then wrap up with a quick sneak peek on what's happening on Friday, does anybody have any other questions or comments before we close out?
It's really good how you built these sessions. It's very easy to follow. I unfortunately couldn't join on Monday, but it was already very good that even though they are connected, they still could also be very well understood, even if you take one piece like today, at least for me, and you brought it in a very human and digestible way with the analogies that you used.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Maria. It means a lot because it was yeah, I mean, coming up with this framework is something that it's hard to describe, but it's just kind of clicked into place, and it's something that now makes sense, and it on the surface could look quite simple, but there's so much that you can break down in it. And yeah, I really appreciate you saying that. Again, we'll give you the recording of this. You've got the recording of the other one. There's so much to unpack with these. So yeah, hopefully you get a lot more value out of it. This is great feedback, guys. I really appreciate it. And you've been such a great group to do this with. Okay, so to give you a sense of what the final piece is, right? So you're gathering more information to see the bigger picture. You've got some tools now for the sort of logical thinking to come up with your point of view. The final and really crucial step is being able to share that point of view. And to do this, it can very easily be crickets, right? Like when we first communicate things. To how do we get people to inspire action, right? So we go from what we covered today, structuring your thinking and developing a point of view, to inspiring action by adjusting your message. I've mentioned this a few times, but the audience is so, so important here. So learning how to communicate in a way that matters to them. We'll unpack a tool for that on Friday. And then communicate only what matters, compressing information down to its most essential components. So I'll leave you with this thought to wrap up today's session on sense making. Thank you so much for your time. Have a good rest of the day. I'll see you all on Friday.